What if Conor McGregor stayed at featherweight? Obviously, for this scenario, we have to make one major concession. He can make the weight, and it doesn't affect his performance. He looked like hell on those scales, but we're just gonna have to pretend like he didn't. So Conor still knocks out Aldo in 13 seconds, but he doesn't move up to lightweight for the super fight, meaning not only does he not become a double champ, but he was never slated to fight RDA, so the Nate Diaz fight also never happens. Instead, he decides he's gonna stay and make a legacy for himself at featherweight. His first fight with Aldo was huge. It is still easily the biggest fight in featherweight history, and with how dominant of a champion Aldo was, it's basic matchmaking to do the immediate rematch. Aldo fares a lot better in this second fight. He doesn't let the emotions get to him, and there isn't a second multinational press tour, so McGregor doesn't have the time to get into his head like he did in the first fight. But ultimately, Conor defeats him a second time. Aldo never looked the same at featherweight after the first Conor fight, and even though the first fight was so short, I think Conor just had his number. The next challenger is Max Holloway. I believe Holloway would still fight Jose Aldo, but he would only fight him once and get the title shot off of that. As Holloway moves into his title shot, it's actually his second fight with Conor, but both men would have been radically different at this time. Max would have a really hard time getting the snowball going on Conor. Conor has the footwork and style to give Max a lot of problems. I think this fight would look similarly to when Max fought Yair. Conor would punch with him instead of being a punching bag, and his leg kicks would give Max a lot of issues, considering Max didn't really defend leg kicks until after he fought Volk. This puts McGregor at 2 title defenses as he moves into his next defense against Brian Ortega. Instead of Ortega fighting Max and getting a solid couple years shaved off his life, he gets the title fight off of his win against Frankie Edgar. And this fight is very, very different from Ortega's first title challenge in our timeline. Instead of it being a prolonged beating, I think Conor gets him out of there by TKO, most likely either late in the second or early in the third. Ortega obviously has a granite chin, but featherweight Conor was a lot more powerful than Holloway. Ortega doesn't have the takedowns to get Conor down into his world, and I see him getting caught coming in or trying to initiate grappling. The Ortega fight would have happened in 2018, so we'll assume that Conor defends about once a year, putting his next defense in the magical year of 2019, meaning his next challenger is none other than Alexander Volkanovski. Conor would step into the octagon undefeated with 3 title defenses opposite of Volkanovski, who was undefeated in the UFC. Because of that fact, I believe this fight would be absolutely massive. And it would be a really interesting matchup, Conor trying to stay on the outside as Volk constantly tags him with hard leg kicks to slow him down. But ultimately I think Conor is dethroned and Volkanovski would take the belt. Volk just mixes it up too well, and Conor wouldn't have the elite takedown defense he developed in preparation for the Khabib fight. His takedown defense would look similarly to how it did in the Mendez fight, and Volkanovski would have an easier time getting him down, especially with how strong Volk is. I think Volk could easily muscle him around on the ground while landing heavy ground and pound, which ultimately is where the fight would end. From here, we really follow the same trajectory. They do the immediate rematch like they did when Volk beat Holloway. Volk would get it done again, and you'd most likely see him fight Max after winning the belt instead of winning it from him. Maybe from here, Conor moves up to lightweight. Maybe the weight cut finally starts getting to him. It could just be 3 to 4 years later than he did the first time. He wouldn't challenge for gold right away, and you'd most likely see him fall into some kind of money fight. Maybe against Gaethje or Poirier, considering he would have had a win over Poirier at the time. But I don't think he'd have enough time in the division to fight Khabib before he retires. If you disagree with the hypothetical, let me know what you think would have happened differently in the comments.